I feel like my fans will love Kissland because I didn't change. It's the same character, but in different settings and scenarios.
Kissland, definitely the most polarizing album in The Weeknd's discography. People either love it, hate it, or haven't gone back to it since their first listen. Why is this album so polarizing? If you're on the side of not liking this album, then you clicked on the right video, as I'll be explaining why I love the album and hopefully give you some things to look out for the next time you give it a listen. Meanwhile, if you love Kissland and you're here to root me on, then keep watching and leave a like. It really helps the channel out with algorithms and whatnot, and without further ado, let's get underway. I want to start by using something a little more recent as a reference point, this little album you may have heard of that dropped at the top of the year called Dawn FM. In a GQ interview with Mark Anthony Green, The Weeknd, when describing Dawn FM, stated, "That's Kissland, man. It's just me understanding how to use Kissland now in my craft." So let's start off by comparing some of the biggest aspects of Kissland and Dawn FM and how The Weeknd uses similar techniques to create such cinematic, ambitious albums.
It's okay, babe. I promise that I felt the worst.
Where past albums like After Hours and My Dear Melancholy were focused on studying the character of The Weeknd, Kissland and Dawn FM are terrific examples of world building in music. Now, it sounds really weird for me to describe something as that, but that's because very few artists do it at this level. This is something we only typically see in movies and novels, building out a universe that we can fully realize in our head. Think Dune, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, etc., etc. But what's really genius is how The Weeknd uses very specific genres of music to depict these worlds. For example, Dawn FM uses 80s elements to display some disco and purgatory that we're dancing with our demons in. Meanwhile, Kissland uses a very theatric,
How does it feel? Do you feel like you did before?
sometimes even operatic, soundscape to paint a dystopian Tokyo where order is prioritized, everyone has somewhere to be, and deep below the surface, there's some pretty messed up stuff going on around here. For example, the music video for Pretty actually plays out the story of the song where he comes back from Tokyo and finds his partner cheating on him. We see hints of underworld, cult-like groups that are up to no good, similar to the Dawn FM red-robed people and the Take My Breath partygoers, illustrating that this is very much a lived-in universe which may pique your interest. We get little sound textures like women speaking foreign languages and screams, taking us further into the sick and twisted mind of Abel Tesfaye. The result is an album that can be quite difficult to put in a playlist because of how each track is a piece to a puzzle that is very distinct and different from anything else out there. The reason why I gravitate to the stories behind these Weeknd albums is how character-centric they are, and Kissland is no different. So let's go ahead and run through the story, but before we do that, to understand Kissland, you have to understand the real-life context of the album. At this point, Abel was coming off of Trilogy, a set of mixtapes that redefined R&B as we knew it, and had finally signed his big label record contract. So coming back to Kissland, the album is really a cinematic memoir of the last few moments before the fame really starts to hit him. Before we get on the other side of the song Rolling Stone off of Trilogy, where he says, because what did we get right after that? We got Beauty Behind the Madness, Starboy, these albums that are real defiant pop albums, or him defining what pop is in the modern sense. We find The Weeknd's character out of Toronto for the first time and struggling with what concepts like love, relationships, intimacy meant in his past life versus the coldness and apathy that those things are often treated with once you get to a certain level of fame. For example, in Belong to the World, he says, songs like Belong to the World hint towards this, but he also talks about the part he plays in it, actively choosing the fame over his partner that could have been the one, when he says,
"She might have been the one, I let it go for a little fun. I made a trade, gave away our days for a little fame."
also mentions how much older he feels as a result of this cynical attitude he's developing. Fast forward to Old Man Abel on the Dawn FM cover, and we see just how much of a toll this life had on The Weeknd. And speaking of which, another comparison I want to mention is how both are transitional albums for the character of The Weeknd. Kissland being his transition into fame, while Dawn FM deals with The Weeknd's transition from life to death and how he feels about the life he's lived. Back to the story, by the time we get to songs like Wanderlust, Live For, and the Titty Alert song, The Weeknd has started to open up to the idea of fame and becoming engulfed in it, which explains why these records are the most upbeat and vicious on the album. Which is another thing he does on Dawn FM, talking about the Gasoline Sacrifice Run on that album. Then we get to Pretty, where The Weeknd comes back home after a year away to find that his partner has cheated on him. He responds with a surprisingly calm acceptance of the situation. And reflects on where he went wrong in lines like,
I try to master the art of that faraway love, but only so much can keep a woman warm.
In the finale, Tears in the Rain, the album fades to black on The Weeknd alone again, lamenting the loss of what could have been the love of his life. He says they all feel the same, just to the fame, because no one will love you like her. It's pointless like tears in the rain. He mentions that she'll probably be better off without him anyways, and that he didn't deserve her love, a theme he comes back to a couple times in future albums, and with that, says goodbye to whatever was holding him back from his past life.
Do you bleep on Revolt? You have to bleep the swear words? Fuck you.
I hope that breakdown helped a little bit when trying to understand such a dense album like Kissland, but I want to talk about the real reason this album will always have a special place in my heart, as it taught me something that you guys might find interesting and might apply when you listen to an album. But before we get to that, I have a little bit of a story for you guys. So let me go ahead and set the scene for you guys real quick. It was 2015, Zayn had just left One Direction, Drake dropped Hotline Bling, that Will and Jada love still meant something to us, and Warriors were winning championships.
And that'll do it. It's over. The Golden State Warriors return to a familiar place. They're on top of the NBA world. The fourth title in 8 years.
Oh, right, that's still a thing. Anyways, I was driving home from the grocery store with my Lola, and I guess I had forgotten the little charger to plug my phone into the aux. So we were just blasting the radio. I'll have a running list here of songs that were big at the time that I'm sure were on the radio. And suddenly the most disruptive song I'd ever heard up to that point on the radio played. And I think you guys know this song. It goes a little something like this. And I remember looking at the little artist label thing and saying The Weeknd, misspelled, of course. Fast forward, I get home, and I remember going up to my room, going on Spotify, looking up The Weeknd, and seeing 2 albums, Kissland, Trilogy, and I'll never forget my my very first reaction to those albums, which was, I didn't like it. I didn't get it. I was a high schooler at the time, and I was still pretty naive and optimistic about the world. So fast forward to about 2019-ish, and I'm in college. I had just gone through my fair share of trials and tribulations, if you will, we'll call it. And I remember scrolling through The Weeknd's Spotify profile. At this point, I'm a fan of his work, and I'm looking through some albums, and I'm like, Kissland. That's an album that I didn't really enjoy, you know? I put it on, and I fucking loved it. I loved it. So why did I tell you guys all that? I'm big into film and film discussion, so there's a phrase that has been thrown around a couple times, which is that movies don't change, we do. And I think that same philosophy can be applied, if not even more so, to albums, especially since the most memorable ones tend to serve as soundtracks to our lives. Now, despite what Twitter will try to tell you, there are very few albums out there that are actually trash. Well, maybe more than a few, but still. I believe you take from an album whatever you bring with you, so if an album isn't hidden for you, don't let that stop you from giving it another listen a couple years from now, and who knows, maybe in that time you took a job in another city, maybe you went through a really traumatic breakup, or maybe you're just a little bit more mature than you were before, have a little bit of a different perspective, and you might find certain songs or lyrics hitting you different. I mean, this is what happened with me with Kissland, Childish Gambino's Awaken My Love, and maybe it's not even a drastic, hate to love type arc. Maybe it's just an album that you like that you find more appreciation for as time goes on. So if after watching this video you go and listen to Kissland and it still doesn't click, that's okay. Maybe it'll click a month, a year, a couple years from now, maybe even a couple decades from now. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, albums don't change. We do.